Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about this little video and this subject that I thought would be very particularly interesting. And I've already done one or two videos, I believe, on this conversation. And I'm probably going to do a couple more about that of the Canelo Alvarez versus Jermell Charlo fight. And of course, for those of you that did not end up hearing the news, Canelo Alvarez, for his next opponent, at least from what we all know as of right now, isn't going to be fighting Jermall Charlo, the middleweight champion, I believe, or possibly the former middleweight champion. I'm not sure if he still has a belt there, but he's going to be fighting that of the littler brother, at least in terms of weight, that of Jermell Charlo, that of the 154-pound undisputed fighter, and also according to the LDBC and new media, someone who deserves to be a top 5 pound-for-pound fighter. I've never personally agreed with that, but like I said, let's see if they keep the same standards if Canelo Alvarez is able to be victorious over that of Jermell Charlo. Anyways, now that Canelo Alvarez is finally fighting one or both of the Charlo brothers, just like I had predicted, the LDBC and new media, they are still not happy with whatever fight Canelo Alvarez takes. Once again, the only fights that they're really truly going to be satisfied with Canelo Alvarez is if he takes a fight that they believe thoroughly that he can lose, like that of a David Benavidez fight, or that of an Artur Beterbiev, a Dimitri Bivol fight, or an Alexander Usyk fight. Any other fight they're not going to be happy with. There's always going to be some sort of excuse, even formally when they wanted Canelo Alvarez to fight those fighters. Once again, let's not forget, at one point in time, new media was claiming that Canelo Alvarez was avoiding that of Billy Joe Saunders, and that he should fight Billy Joe Saunders, and that he also would not fight Caleb Plant. But then as soon as he fought both of those fighters, what did they say? Oh, well, Canelo Alvarez, he's fighting weak European fighters. They also kept saying that Canelo Alvarez, that he was avoiding both of the Charlo brothers, even the lighter Jermell Charlo. And there's many people, including that of Dante's Boxing Nation, that would claim that Canelo won't even fight Jermell Charlo. Instead, he'd rather fight one of these weaker European white boys. Well, now all of a sudden that the chickens have come home to roost, all of a sudden these guys have truly told you what they actually believe, who the victor will actually be of either of those fights. And it's always been Canelo Alvarez. They talk all this shit about how they believe that these certain fighters will beat Canelo Alvarez, that of the Charlo brothers. And then every single time the fight has almost been close to being made or being close to being announced, they change their minds every single time within a matter of minutes. Isn't that interesting how that works? But anyways, in this video, I just thought that it was going to be very interesting because, once again, as I've been saying for a very long time, the LDBC and new media's narrative, basically what their main objective is to make sure that people like Canelo Alvarez in the first place do not grace the #1 pound-for-pound spot. That is their main objective. Just like with that of quote-unquote old media, at times one could claim that they do that with certain black fighters. But at least old media and ESPN, one thing I'll say about them is that they at least give credit to certain black fighters, like that of a Shakur Stevenson or a Terrence Bud Crawford or a Devin Haney or a Gervonta Tank Davis. These LDBC and new media guys, they don't even want to give the slightest amount of credit to that of any fighter who is not a black American fighter. But either way, both are biased in my view. But I just find it very interesting, once again, how the standards completely change depending on which fight is being made and which fighter they're talking about. But anyways, let's get straight into the video. Let's see what Mr. Boxing Ego has to say.
We unpack. Alright, Jermell Charlo posted it. Premier Boxing Champs, PBC, posted it. And payday, you want payday, I know that. Canelo Alvarez posted it. So it gotta be true. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Have no fear, the best in the business is here, and it's not even close. Peep my first video I made about this. Canelo announced he will.
Let me actually state this about Mr. Boxing Ego, because I actually don't tend to mind Mr. Boxing Ego's channel. I think a lot of the times that he can bring up certain points that are logically sound, and that he brings up a lot of points that would quote-unquote be good points. I certainly find him to be a better analyzer than that of Dante's Boxing Nation or Aki TV. But unfortunately, like that with a lot of the new media or the LDBC cult, A lot of the times they let their fanboyism and their racial politics get in the way. And with Boxing Ego, we've seen it way too much with that of Canelo Alvarez or Vasily Lomachenko or Tyson Fury. But anyway, and what do we know about all those fighters? They are the quote-unquote best of their weight divisions. Once again, and I already stated this because I had certain people say, well, they gave credit to Josh Taylor and David Benavidez. Once again, those guys are not the main threats. Those guys are not the main threats. Josh Taylor was never the main threat. The reason why they were promoting and hyping up Josh Taylor in the first place is because they knew if he ever moved up to 147 pounds, they could use him basically if Terrence Bud Crawford or Errol Spence Jr. defeated him. They could basically say, wow, take a look at that. Terrence Bud Crawford and Errol Spence Jr., they defeated, basically a complete unified champion, undisputed versus undisputed. Take a look at how good Terrence Bud Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. are. And they would have deserved credit, no doubt about it, when it comes down to it. But then when it comes to Canelo Alvarez possibly fighting someone like that, and don't get me wrong, Jermell Charlo is coming up 2 weight classes, but let the record also show that Canelo has never really been a natural 168-pounder. So once again, they use certain fighters a lot of the times as a pawn. They were using Josh Taylor. They were also using David Benavidez and still are using David Benavidez.
Be fighting Charlo. Plot twist. It's not the Charlo that you think. This is not the bigger Charlo, Jermell Charlo. This is the undisputed 154-pound Jermell Charlo. Lines only, yeah. Keep running your mouth. I find it very interesting. Now, if you peeped the first video, I was a bit unsure, for real, because I didn't expect that. The reports were basically suggesting that Canelo was doing this multi-fight deal with PBC, and he was interested in fighting Charlo. Little did I know it was the smaller Charlo.
This pretty much is the worst fight possible for that of the LDBC or new media. And the reason why that is because this really fucks up their narratives and fucks up their plans really for the long haul. Because Canelo Alvarez fighting Jermell Charlo, not only does it destroy the narrative of him avoiding the quote-unquote Charlo brothers when it comes down to it, but it also is going to be harder to promote Terrence Bud Crawford or Errol Spence Jr. as the for sure number 1 pound for pound if they do go up to 154 pounds and defeat that of Jermell Charlo. If Jermell Charlo completely gets his ass kicked against that of Canelo Alvarez, because then they will have to acquiesce more than likely, when it comes down to it, that Jermell Charlo was coming off of a loss, But I bet you money overall, once again, these are the same guys that, claim that, oh, well, Canelo, he fought Danny Jacobs already with a loss on his record and Sergey Kovalev with a loss on his record. But I bet you money, Jermell Charlo, if he gets his ass kicked against Canelo Alvarez, which more than likely I see happening, we'll see what happens. Then I bet you money that they're probably going to say, oh, well, take a look at Terrence and Errol Spence, take a look at the fighter that they defeated. But they know overall deep down once again that Jermell's not going to be the same fighter. So this really pisses them off for a multitude of reasons.
Reports all suggested that he was leaning towards Jermell Charlo, who fights at 160. So it is what it is. I mean, my thoughts are the same. People can say whatever they want, but my thoughts are the same. Kind of weird that you chose the smaller Charlo, and I'm the king of consistency when it comes to this boxing stuff. I said...
No, you're not, but it is what it is.
The same thing for Amir Khan when he moved up to fight against Canelo Alvarez. He moved to 155 from 147. I said the same thing when Kell Brook moved up 2 weight classes to fight Triple G.
Right, but when Canelo Alvarez wants to go up to cruiserweight to fight a fighter, you say, why can't Canelo Alvarez fight Alexander Usyk? Like, get the fuck out of here.
And I'm going to say the same thing for...
So basically, you keep the same standards when it's a fighter that you don't like. Like when Kell Brook is moving up to fight Gennady Golovkin, or Rigondeaux fighting Lomachenko, or... Amir Khan fighting Canelo Alvarez. Yeah, when it's a fighter that you like to tear down, you like to keep the same standards. But then when it comes to Canelo Alvarez, the fighter that you do like to tear down, fighting a bigger fighter, all of a sudden, he needs to show up and quit making excuses. Like, come on.
Charlo. Now, Charlo did bring this on himself in terms of, he said undisputed versus undisputed, yeah. And he did a live stream. And he entertained the idea. And
I agree. Not only has the Charlo brothers, not only have they brought this upon themselves, but the LDBC and the media has brought this upon themselves. They keep talking all this shit about how Canelo Alvarez, he won't even fight Jermell Charlo, and Jermell Charlo, he could even possibly beat Canelo Alvarez. So there should be no excuses, right, when Canelo Alvarez possibly beats out of Jermell Charlo? You know, because Jermell Charlo, once again, I keep hearing from a lot of these channels that Canelo Alvarez, that he's this limited fighter, he's this average Mexican fighter. So Jermell Charlo should make this fight really competitive, because apparently the only advantage that Canelo is going to have is the size advantage. And Charlo, of course, as we know by them, is top 5 pound per pound. So what's the problem?
And just knowing Canelo's going to look for these advantages. So it is what it is. Still a big fight. Jermell is undisputed. I don't really know all the particulars in terms of how they both can put up their belts, unless it's just the theory.
They're not going to put up their belts, you dumbass. At the end of the day, I don't know overall why he keeps thinking that they're both going to put up their belts. Jermell Charlo is not going to put up his belts. It's really not that hard to figure out, unless there's some piece of information overall that I don't know about. Jermell Charlo, it's very simple. He's going to move up 2 weight classes. It's going to be promoted as undisputed versus undisputed, and Jermell Charlo's belts are not going to be on the line.
Of both guys are
It's more going to be overall of those invisible belts. Of course, unless Jermell Charlo ends up winning the fight, then yes, of course, he will end up getting belts.
Disputed, which they are, but I don't know how you're going to fight for 8 belts. I don't know the particulars there, but Charlo did request this. He did call for it, and he said that Canelo couldn't beat him. I think Canelo was backed against the wall, and DAZN was tired of paying for him for less than fights where they couldn't recoup some of their money. So what do you have to do? I think Canelo literally had to go to PBC to pursue these types of fights, because people are growing tired of losing money. PBC can make money with this fight despite the circus fight nature in terms of moving up multiple weights. I know some people are like, oh, but, you know, Antonio Tarver and B-Hop and Roy Jones and stuff like that. I mean, fighters used to fight every week and every 2 weeks, like Sugar Ray Robinson. We're in a different time. It's a different era. Guys are making more money than ever. So you don't really have to do this. The other thing that why I don't actually fancy this move is Jermell Charlo's been on a bit of a layoff, and he's coming off a hand injury. So to go off of a hand injury, and like the
hand injury to me is really nothing but an excuse. And I know people overall that they'll disagree with me on that. I think he suffered a broken hand in that of sparring. Listen, it's not like Jermell Charlo completely crushed his hand or anything like that. Jermell Charlo is going to come up in good shape, and he's going to be just fine for that at the Canelo Alvarez fight. I'm not really worried about the broken hand, just like I wasn't really worried about Canelo Alvarez's hand in that of the John Ryder fight. But, excuse me, for those of you that truly do believe that it's a factor, maybe you do believe it's a factor, I understand. I just don't believe that it's enough of a factor, just in my personal view. But once again, it's very interesting how Ego brings up that that Jermell Charlo recently had a broken hand. Where were these same standards when Canelo Alvarez recently had a surgery for his hand, I believe, removing calluses, and had to have hand surgery? Jermell Charlo hasn't had to have hand surgery from what I know about. But Canelo Alvarez, right after hand surgery, he wants him to get in the ring with David Benavidez or Artur Beterbiev or Dimitri Bivol. Once again, where are these same standards, man?
thing is, everything I'm saying is documented common knowledge. And Canelo, the Chupapi Muñeños, the Cinnabons, when Canelo chose John Ryder, if you look at it, they were saying what? They were saying, oh, yeah, he chose John Ryder because he's coming off of a hand injury and he needs a tune-up. He needs to, test the waters before going into a Benavidez fight or a David Morrell because he's coming off a hand injury. But these same idiotic fans aren't going to say that for Jermell Charlo, who is coming off a hand injury. You know why? Because a lot of them are racist. And a lot.
Right, Ego, but I tend to agree with you a little bit on that point. But what does that really say about you? Because you're doing the exact same shit. Once again, where were the videos? I don't remember them personally. Maybe I'm wrong about it. But, Ego claims he's so consistent. Where were these videos about Canelo Alvarez? Well, hold on, people. Canelo can't fight David Benavidez or some of these other guys quite as of yet because he's coming off of a hand surgery. Excuse me. Like, none of these same standards were applied. So you want to talk about other people not holding the same standards because they're quote-unquote racist when it comes down to what does that make you? Because every single time with Canelo Alvarez or Tyson Fury or Lomachenko, you never keep the same standards. We all know that the LDBC and new media, that they have a big racial issue, at least for those of us that actually know what the fuck is going on when it comes down to it. That's why I say the LDBC and new media, they're the biggest hypocrites, possibly debatably, in all that of sports media.
A lot of them are biased, and a lot of them show an insane favoritism, so they don't care.
Wow, who does that sound like? Showing an insane favoritism towards a certain racial demographic of fighters, and then hating on overall other racial demographic of fighters that are not a part of your objective or inner machinations or plans. Who does that sound like?
As long as,
once again, Canelo Alvarez, apparently it's not okay for him to fight certain guys like Jermell Charlo or other guys like that. You know, he's ducking and avoiding guys, you know, fighting John Ryder. And listen, I get it. John Ryder is not a great opponent. I agree. But these are the same exact guys that when it comes to Gervonta Tank Davis, when he's fighting Isaac Pitbull Cruz and Rolly Romero, you know, oh, you guys are just hating. Why are you pocket watching? You know, you know, they're real contenders. Like, get the fuck out of here.
The fighter that they're rooting against is at the deficit. They didn't want Canelo to be at a deficit and fight a David Benavidez. They wanted him to fight a guy.
Right, but as you just admitted, Canelo Alvarez would be at the deficit. I keep telling people this. They're not going to be happy with the fight unless they believe Canelo Alvarez is at a deficit and that they believe that he can truly lose. So once again, you want Canelo Alvarez to be at a deficit almost in every single one of the fights that he fights in. That's why you keep calling him the fight Artur Beterbiev and Dimitri Bivol and David Benavidez. And don't get me wrong, if Canelo Alvarez is the quote-unquote #1 pound-for-pound fighter, he is going to have to take some of those fights, at least the ones at 68, like against David Benavidez and David Morrell. But you never keep the same standards for other fighters, you know, who are allegedly either the face of boxing or top pound-for-pound fighters like Jermell Charlo or that overall of Gervonta Tank Davis. So if Jermell Charlo is supposed to be top 5 pound-for-pound, how come he can't fight Canelo Alvarez without any excuses? But then Canelo Alvarez, he's apparently not even on some of these guys' list, but he's supposed to be fighting guys that are 2 weight classes bigger than him. Sometimes, if not even bigger. Once again, these are the same guys that wanted Canelo to fight Alexander Usyk. Once again, I don't mind consistency and standards. I agree overall that Jermell Charlo, he is going to be at a size and weight disadvantage. All that is understandable. But don't spew all this bullshit about overall how, you know, Canelo Alvarez, he needs to fight these guys where he's at a deficit. And then as soon as Canelo Alvarez, you know, the guy that he's allegedly ducked for years in Jermell Charlo, as soon as that happens, now all of a sudden you have a problem with it. Like, get the fuck out of here.
Like John Ryder that you knew he was going to beat. Jermell Charlo, they don't want him to take a tune-up. They don't want him to get a John Ryder and then...
Well, shit, Canelo Alvarez couldn't take a tune-up right after a hand surgery. So why the fuck should Jermell Charlo get a tune-up? Once again, Eagle, I understand what you're saying, and I think that it's completely logical, but at the same time, you never keep the same standards for other fighters. You know, where was this same talk about Canelo Alvarez needed a tune-up right after the hand surgery? None of this was happening. He wanted him to get straight in the ring with Beterbiev or Bivol or David Benavidez.
Maybe fight Canelo. They want him straight away, moving up a bunch of weight because he is a name and he is coming off an injury. They want to give Canelo as many...
He's coming off of a broken hand. Like, come on. It is what it is. Now, had Jermell Charlo recently had a surgery or had it been more of a serious injury, you know, then maybe I would say okay. You know, but a broken hand and sparring, like, come on.
Advantages, and I think that's weak. And I think that's a testament to Canelo's base, a lot of them. You know, a lot of Canelo's fan base, they want to see Canelo with these insane advantages because they truthfully don't believe in him like they claim they do in the comments section. Because if that was the case, they would be pushing for ready-made fights. Like, outside of both Charlos, who both have different things that...
Right, but you've been pushing for both Charlo fights for years. So how come all of a sudden now that Canelo Alvarez is about to do it, all of a sudden they're not good enough anymore? Like, get the fuck out of here. And I understand, you know, the advantages with Jermell Charlo having the size disadvantage, and Jermell Charlo has been out for years. Listen, I understand that. All that is understandable. But at the end of the day, if you don't want those fights to happen, then stop talking shit. Just start pushing for the David Benavidez fight. But these guys don't do that. They keep saying Canelo Alvarez, oh, he won't even fight Charlo or all these other guys. Then as soon as he's about to fight one of them, oh, well, not now. Like, come on.
fighting Canelo, outside of the ring. Problems. David Benavidez just fought March 25th. He's a former two-time champion at the division. And guess what? He's ready-made for that division, 168. Canelo could and should be defending his undisputed titles versus him, but instead, he wants to pick the Charlos, two guys that he could have fought since 54. He could have fought him since 154. And he's
right, he could have fought him since 154. And Canelo Alvarez is still not a natural 168 pounder, so why not fight him now?
picking these particular moments because he's a vulture. He's a scavenger. So I had to get that little ego rant out. Still a big fight. I'm still going to watch the fight, of course. Two big names.
Yes, you are still going to watch the fight, but you have to put your excuses in already early. And don't get me wrong. In my view, it is not an excuse to say that Canelo Alvarez has a clear size advantage. That's not an excuse. But once again, what's so annoying about these channels is that they always talk all this load of shit, and then they never keep the same standards. Their energy always changes.
2023 is the boxing year that just...
Keep in mind, once again, these are the same guys that were saying, why is Vasily Lomachenko not fighting Manny Pacquiao or Terrence Bud Crawford? Keep in mind, these are the same guys that say Canelo needs to fight Alexander Usyk. So get the fuck out of here with your bullshit.
Keeps giving. PBC is, listen to me, Premier Boxing Champions is decimating, and I do mean decimating, the competition. There is no other boxing. I don't care who you like. I don't care who you work for. I don't know who you beat. I don't know who you lost to. There is no boxing entity in boxing that is putting out these blockbuster hits. There's some other good fights. Don't get that wrong. Like, I am looking forward to Virgil Ortiz versus Stanionis and, some other fights like that. But bar none, nobody is putting up these types of scores. This is like Kobe when he scored over 81 points or whatever. This is like Steph Curry number.
I gotta make a video on Kobe one of these days, because a lot of the Kobe Bryant fans, when I've made basketball videos in the past, they haven't liked my little analyzation. I'm gonna have to do a video one of these days about Kobe Bryant versus Tim Duncan and Shaquille O'Neal, and who was the clear best player of that generation, or debatably.
This is LeBron numbers. They're really flexing their muscle here and putting on big fights because, again, I have my own nitpicks about the Canelo Charlo fight, but nonetheless, I will say this, it's a big fight. People are going to buy this. People just because they know who both people are. And I'm going to make another video, DAZN curse.
Right, once again, where were these same criticisms when Mikey Garcia fought Errol Spence Jr.? Once again, the LDBC and the media, they're so in the victimization mentality that basically they take a look at what a lot of other people do and they say, oh, well, okay, you're going to do that, then I'm going to do the same thing. And then as soon as something, once again, comes back to return to them, then all of a sudden they just bitch and moan about how the victimization standards, and how things are unfair. Once again, you have to keep the same standards.
They got to do something because as far as I'm concerned, PBC in 2 fights with Canelo Alvarez, and I don't even know what the rest of his multi-fight deal will consist of, but in 2 fights, quality versus quantity, it's better than several DAZN fights that Canelo Alvarez has had, the first being Rocky Fielding, which was terrible. Since 2018, Canelo has had 9 fights on DAZN. And this...
Well, in terms of popularity, the Jermell Charlo fight is going to be better than the majority of the DAZN fights. But in terms of competitiveness, in terms of the actual talent, I would personally think that Billy Joe Saunders is above Jermell Charlo. I know a lot of people would not agree with that, but I think that Jermell Charlo, just like Jermall Charlo, if you put him in the ring with a lot of those true middleweight or super middleweight fighters, he would not beat the majority of the A-grade guys. He just wouldn't.
This is going to be only his second fight with Al Heyman and PBC, but those 2 PBC fights, Caleb Plant for Undisputed, and now Undisputed versus Undisputed with Jermell Charlo, despite the move up and all the stuff I said earlier, it's still a bigger blockbuster fight. In 2 PBC fights, I guarantee you these numbers will make a whole lot more sense, the Plant fight and the Charlo fight, than 9 other fights since 2018 on DAZN. The DAZN curse continues. Ego Stradamus strikes again. DAZN looks really bad here. Talk about mismanagement. I'm literally the best in the business. I told you guys all these things, and now you're getting to see them. DAZN said pay-per-view is dead. DAZN said that, Canelo was doing good business on him. That's not the case, because in 2 fights with PBC, these fights make a whole lot more sense.
Well, I'm sure that Canelo was doing great business with them, but at the end of the day, PBC, they have the main roster that everyone wants to see.
Business-wise, and in terms of being lucrative with ROI, than any fight that he's fought on DAZN, including fights like Dimitri Bivol. Bivol obviously beat him. That was a good fight in terms of a test of your skills type of fight, but it wasn't a...
Right, and apparently there's no excuses for Canelo Alvarez in that fight. He's just supposed to win that fight, even though he's pretty much a natural middleweight fighter. But for Jermell Charlo, the size is too much, even though he's supposed to be top 5 pound for pound. Anyway.
Blockbuster fight. Let's not kid ourselves. So you got to also give a lot of credit to Jermell Charlo. He's truly about that life, and he's a warrior.
I agree. I do give him a lot of props. Now, this might be a little bit too much, in my view, of a step up. But like I said, we'll see, because I don't really know where Canelo Alvarez is at this point in time in his career. He did not look good to me in his last fight at all. And I know a lot of people, they've said that it was the hand surgery. To me, a hand surgery or a hand injury isn't really enough. Now, when Vasily Lomachenko had the shoulder injury right before he fought Jose Pedraza, that's something that could be relatively well, because that's a more serious injury. But I'm sorry, but to me, Canelo just did not look like the same fighter at all in that last fight. But let's see what he does in this one.
Not being afraid to move up multiple pounds or weight classes or whatever to fight a guy like Canelo, he's truly not scared, especially coming off an injury. So all the credit really goes to Jermell Charlo. I'm not giving Canelo a whole bunch of credit. He tried to weight drain Badu Jack. That didn't work out. DAZN wasn't paying for...
He's not giving Canelo Alvarez a lot of credit. Right. We all knew that from the start.
For the filth, Lauren and filth. And now he was going to fight Jermell Charlo, coming off a long layoff and personal problems and a Montiel performance. But now he chose to pick someone much smaller who has no experience above 160. Weird move, but...
Once again, Canelo is the only fighter that I've ever heard when it comes to these quote-unquote standards where they said, well, Canelo, you can't fight this guy because he has no prior experience at this weight class. What other fighter has there ever been these type of standards for, at least in recent history? Like I said, that's why I say he's suffering from the #1 pound-for-pound effect, because they're the only type of fighters that get these stupid, narratives. Like what, moving up one weight class is really going to be a deal breaker for Jermell Charlo? Like, get the fuck out of here.
Still a big fight nonetheless.
If you're a real pound-for-pound fighter, moving up one weight class, that really shouldn't be a deal breaker.
My truest thoughts, just be the realest I ever...
Let's see if they use those same standards with Mr. Inoue if he were to lose to Steven Fulton. Let's see if they say the same thing. Yeah, he beat Inoue, but Inoue was never, at that weight class before. This was his first fight, so can we really give him that much credit? Like, get the fuck out of here.
Spoke against all odds. I'm the best in the business, so subscribe. Do yourself a favor. And I'm out.
But anyways, that's pretty much about it. But I think Boxing Ego brings up certain logical points. Of course, there's a lot of hypocrisy there. But, it is what it is. Anyways, very interesting fight. We'll have to see how this goes. More than likely, I'll predict Canelo Alvarez to win. But you never know, because Canelo, to me, in his last fight, looks a shell of what he formerly did. But we'll see what happens. Anyways, that's really about it for today. I'll talk to y'all later. We'll see what happens.